welcome tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's such a pleasure to have you all here. Our live stream topic for this evening is, are you too sensitive or are you oversensitive? And I did this topic because as an empath and as somebody who's super sensitive, this has been something I've had to navigate throughout my entire lifetime. I remember as a young child, my parents took me to St. Lawrence Market. And when we walked through the fish department, which was full of smells and strong sensations, it was more than I could manage. And I ran over to the garbage can and proceeded to throw up. And I wouldn't say that it's that I was too sensitive or oversensitive in the fish market. It was just more sensation than I knew how to manage. And so that's the topic that we're going to be exploring for this evening is, how can you learn to work with sensitivity in a way that is positive and helpful? As usual for this evening, if you are interested in having a reading tonight, please go ahead and send me your first and last name to this email address. I will double check my mail as we go, and I'll be able to see if anyone's writing in. And yeah, without further ado, why don't we get started in the conversation this evening, which is, are you too sensitive? So, are you oversensitive? Here's the premise or the foundation for our talk here this evening. It is unlikely that if you're a sensitive person, you are too sensitive or excessively sensitive. In fact, I would say the issue is that perhaps you're not sensitive enough, or perhaps put more accurately, you are not enough in your sensitivity. And what I mean by that, and the way that I phrase that, is the primary challenge that sensitive people face is not being sufficiently embodied in their sensitivity. So sensitivity is an awareness, it's a quality of presence, it's a connection to the world and the place around you. And it's easy in that sensitivity to find it hard to be fully in it and embodied. And so the struggle comes not because you're sensitive, but because you don't know how to reside in your sensitivity. And the advantage of this is that sensitivity can be trained and it can be developed. So that's going to be our topic for this evening. Really nice to see Jude and Suze here. Looking forward to having you, and anyone else, welcome to say hi on the chat board here this evening. I can read your comments. So, okay. So let's go on from here with our conversation. The first thing to be aware of and to consider is that your sensitivity is a strength. I remember early on in my personal healing journey, I went to my intuitive counselor and I said, I wish I could just be a soldier. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. Why do I have to feel everything? Why do I have to feel so much in everything? Why, when someone says something, I can't just take it at face value and I read into it in so many levels. And, you know, I wish I could just be a soldier. And he said to me, Colin, that's not your strength. Your sensitivity is your strength. And if you're a sensitive person, that's the thing I'd like to impart on you this evening, is the awareness or the belief that your sensitivity is a strength. It is not a weakness. It is not an impediment. It's not something that stands in your way to achieving your goals. In fact, it is there to serve you, and it is a strength. And let me give you an example of some of the ways that we don't see sensitivity as a strength. And so imagine instead of being a sensitive person, you were a really strong person, super buff. Everywhere you look, people are like, man, that is a strong person there. You're imposing in your strength. Now, imagine if you're that strong, someone coming up to you and saying, you're too strong. Like, what's with you with all your big muscles and everything? And you're just too strong. And in this situation, people would never say that. They'd say, wow, you're really strong. And I'd like to develop a culture where we'd say, wow, you're really sensitive. Like, that's an admirable trait. It's often not seen as one, but I consider it to be one. I admire sensitive people because they're very sensitive. Imagine that you chose to hide your strength because you didn't want to be a burden to other people. Oh man, I'm so strong, and other people get, insecure around me, or I pick things up and then, it shows them, their strength. And so I should just pretend I'm not so strong. You would never do that if you were strong. You'd be proud of your strength. And it's the same with sensitivity. You never want to hide your sensitivity because you see it as a burden. The next one is, imagine someone complaining that your strength is making them feel weak. Why are you so strong? You're just making me feel weak. We'd never say that. We say, wow, you're so strong. I feel weak. but not being upset at that. Why are you so sensitive? You're making me feel like a brute or something like that. People wouldn't say that. And finally, imagine somebody complaining because you were strong or able to lift more than them. And this is, I like the word lifting in that, because sensitivity is a lifting, right? When you're sensitive, in a way, you're doing more lifting than others. Imagine a strong person standing beside a less strong person carrying a box. Imagine the strong person. Why are you so weak? Why are you making me do all the heavy lifting and carrying here? It wouldn't make any sense. Being a sensitive person around people that are less sensitive, imagine them saying, like, why do I have to feel into everything and why can't you feel into it? It doesn't make any sense. So anyhow, those are just some examples of how sensitivity and strength, if you flip it, you can sort of see how we don't see sensitivity as a strength, but really it is. And then the final one here is sensitive doesn't mean fragile. It can turn into fragility, and that's often what happens with sensitivity. The world feels intense, and so rather than learning to be in the world in your sensitivity, there's a tendency to back away from it. So we're not talking about being fragile, we're just talking about being sensitive. So why is sensitivity a strength? Sensitivity is a strength because it enables you to connect deeply to reality in the present moment. When you're sensitive and you can feel deeply, you feel more into things. Just like a master sommelier can taste the terroir of the wine, can taste the year of the grape and the region and what the season was like. A sensitive person can feel into the nuances of emotion, of how people are feeling, of what's going on. It enables you to feel deeply into this present moment. And that can create a more rich experience of reality. Now, wouldn't you rather be able to connect to a depth of what is? It's really interesting because I would say that's actually not something that most sensitive people want to do. How can I be less sensitive? And I would say, how can you be more in your sensitivity? Ignorance is not bliss, right? If you are experiencing intensity in the world around you, simply being ignorant, it disconnects you from what's going on. I would rather be more connected. I understand that's a threat or it's challenging because you don't know how to deal with it. That deeper level of awareness can be overwhelming. But if you train it, if you develop it, if you see it as, oh, I can feel deeply, wouldn't you rather be connected to all that is? The next part is, just because others may struggle to connect to this depth, do you want that? You being around people who seem at ease with things when they're not at ease. I can understand that they may feel more at ease, but I would rather not be at ease when things shouldn't be at ease. Like, I'd rather be upset about climate change when I'm around somebody who is ignorant to it or disconnected from it. And so just because others may not be as sensitive as you, don't let that define you. If you're a sensitive person and you're around less sensitive people, be as sensitive as you are. That's a helpful thing to be. Next, and this is a huge one, as much as you may experience sensitivity as a burden, and that's certainly what I experience, it's also an opportunity. The more you can feel into a circumstance, the more you can feel into a situation, the more information you have to work with, the more you can make decisions that are based on depth and intimacy than on impulse or disconnected understandings. And this is an interesting one because there are a lot of world leaders that I wouldn't say are very sensitive, and they're potentially very effective because they're not taking into consideration all the needs around them. And while that may make the leadership role easier, it's my way or the highway, I don't know that necessarily makes them great leaders. It can go in the opposite direction. I'm so sensitive, I'm taking into consideration everybody's needs. I don't know what to do. I'm not decisive. So I would say leaders tend to be perhaps a little less overwhelmed in sensitivity and a little more directive in what they feel is right. And there's an advantage to that, but there's also a disadvantage to that. So sensitivity is an opportunity. This one I think is really funny, which is, how's it going not connecting to the depth? Like, can you disconnect? Can you not be bothered by things? Can you just shut off and, no, I'm fine, I don't care, everything's okay? I personally have not had success with this. I find myself feeling overwhelmed. And when I try to do that, I can't disconnect. And so Sure, you can try to disconnect from depth, but good luck with that. That's all I could say there. So if you can't escape it, if you're sensitive and you can't escape depth, what do? Number one, you need to process. If you're feeling deeply into situations, if there's a lot to consider, a lot to make sense of, a lot to understand, a lot to work through, then the job is to process. And the phrase that I like to say is, just like a warrior, their job is to be courageous in the field of battle or in a war. The empath or the sensitive person's job is to process. And that's your role. Your role is to process. Your heavy lifting is to process. And so notice if when you're experiencing this thing of processing, do you experience that as a burden or a gift? Now, I wanted to go to a quick scene here in a book. Let me see if I can pull it up. Leo Leone. I don't have this book at present, but he was the child's author that I referenced in my previous talk about tribal consciousness. He wrote a book called Frederick, and this is the cover for Frederick here. And what I love about Frederick is Frederick the field mouse. He's a different kind of mouse because, and you can sort of see in this scene here, all the mice right before winter are working really hard. They're kind of more like the warriors or the workers, and they say, Frederick, why don't you work? And Frederick says, I do work. I gather the rays from the sun for the dark winter days. So part of what Frederick is saying here in this instance is that work doesn't just mean doing heavy lifting. Work can also mean that you are feeling into things. You're processing, just like an artist's work is to are feeling into it. Now, I have a good question here I just want to bring up, which is, this is from Starlight Starbright. Do sensitive people process slower because they process deeper? It's a good question. I think you may experience yourself needing to take more time to process because of the depth that you feel, but I don't know if that you're processing slower so much as processing deeper. In other words, it takes the time it takes to process. And if you are feeling more things, very likely you need to feel into more things, and that just takes more time, right? And so it's not that it takes you longer to process the same amount of information, it's that you're processing more information, and that will likely take you more time. And that can seem like a big judgment for yourself, like, why do I have to spend so much time processing? Like, what's wrong with me? And I would encourage you not to take that perspective. It takes the time to process that it takes to process. And so part of this is to recognize your role as a processor when you are feeling into situations. So now, somebody has to process. Someone has to do it. You know, this is what's so interesting about difficult situations, is that it has to go somewhere. As a sensitive child, disharmony in the family landed on me. If you're a sensitive person, there's a good chance that disharmony in the family landed on you. Somebody has to process it. And my point in that is, if you are a sensitive person, shouldn't you be the best person to process? In other words, if you can't escape feeling it, then aren't you best suited to process or work through things? I'm just reading Starlight's. That says, yes, I process well, I'd agree, but it's a long haul. At the end of the day, I really feel I really get it. Yeah. You know, it is a long haul. It is a challenge to process to the depth to which you're capable of. And I understand that completely. It's not an easy task. And many empaths or many sensitive people find this part of the journey profoundly difficult, especially when those around you don't seem to find this part so difficult. They're not processing. It is worthwhile. It's your job. It's the way that you can serve the world. So if not you, well, then who else is going to be processing? So as a sensitive person, I invite you to ask this question of yourself. Do you try to diminish your sensitivity, or do you try to strengthen yourself to be in it? I know for myself, I try to decrease intensity around me. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do that, But if that is your main MO of trying to deal with sensitivity, that's a withdrawal energy from reality, and you're not learning how to strengthen yourself to be in it. And so I certainly don't advise that process. And this is a really important one. Do you resent having to do all the processing? I know when I went to study nonviolent communication with Marshall Rosenberg, I was like, why is it always me? Why am I always the one that needs to empathize with everybody else? Why am I the one that has to feel into these things and acknowledge what's going on? It's not fair. And anytime someone uses the word it's not fair, I think it's a guarantee that you're in your child archetype, because kids think in terms of fair. Adults don't think in terms of fair. Adults think of like a burden, like I feel burdened by the responsibility of feeling this. I would love for others to, but clearly no one is. What do I do about it? And so if you resent being sensitive because of the additional work that you need to do, number one, I haven't found a better way, right? I don't know how else to be other than to feel into the world that I do. And expecting others to do it hasn't got me any further down the road. In fact, it's made things worse. And so the phrase that I use for that one is the job of feeling into a situation or empathizing is the first one who is sane. You feel pain in the circumstance. The person you're with feels pain in the circumstance. You're both struggling in the circumstance. But the one who can get to the place of, oh, I see that this person is struggling. Oh, I see that I'm struggling. I see that we're doing the best that we can. There are times that I have dug my heels in and been like, nope, I'm not going to be the bigger person in this situation. I want the other person to be the bigger person. And I would say 99.9% of the time, it has not worked out. When I'm the one that's sane, it's my job to step up and do that. And as Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. If you wish others would be more acknowledging of what's going on, you acknowledge more of what's going on. If you would like people to be more compassionate to the difficulty in a circumstance, you be more compassionate to the difficulty in a circumstance. This is really an inside job, and expecting others to do it, I've tried, it hasn't worked for me. If it's worked for you, please share. I'd love to hear about how you've gotten others to take responsibility so you don't have to do the heavy lifting. And there are times that happens in my life, but more often than not, when I really wish someone else would do it, when I strive to be the change that I want to see, that seems to make a big difference. And so here's a really important one to ask yourself. Do you negotiate your sensitivity? And what do I mean by that? As a sensitive person, this is you, this is the other person, when you are coming into harmony with somebody else, sensitive people tend to feel what that harmony point is. Oh, if I say this, that person will be happy. If I say it this way, they'll be able to hear me. If I don't say this, I won't aggravate them. So you can use your sensitivity to try to create more harmony. And in a weird way, really great salespeople, it's exactly what they do. They feel into a situation and they figure out, what can I say to get you to buy this thing? I would call that a harmony point. It may be a harmony point in that they're like, hey, you should buy it. And you come out of this is integrity, by the way. And you may come out of your integrity. So you have that ability to feel into that. Now, the challenge is, as a sensitive person, just because you can feel into the harmony point doesn't mean you stay in your integrity. In fact, you might find it easier to negotiate your integrity rather than stand in it. In other words, it's easier sometimes to be like, okay, I'll just come to your place, than it is to say, hey, this is as far as I can go. Would you be willing to come and meet me on some level? And that can be the really difficult part. It's easy to abandon yourself, and sensitive people often do. Now, I would say there's an association with sensitive people that they have weaker immune systems. And I don't think that sensitive people have weaker immune systems. I think sensitive people have a greater tendency to either abandon themselves or to attack themselves. And so what do I mean by that? Well, here I am. I can't go beyond here without it coming at this is called the cost of my well-being. I can't come beyond this. So if I have a tendency to be here and it feels like this will never feel like this. It's easier either to attack myself. What's wrong with me? Why can't I be okay? Why can't I, what did I do wrong here? Or the opposite, fine, I'll just do what you want and come out of your integrity. And neither of those things are healthful. In fact, the first one, what's wrong with me? You're withdrawing from your integrity with yourself. You're attacking yourself. And so people who are sensitive do not have weak immune systems, though they may not have learned how to utilize its strength. And that's called learning to honor your sensitivity and not negotiate it. And so as a sensitive person, I've got a good little test for you to check out. As I was thinking about this workshop, I went for a mountain bike ride, and this is exactly what happened. I was riding down a trail. It was narrow, and there was a cyclist coming towards me, and I was coming towards the cyclist. And now in that situation, I see three possibilities. One, the other person moves out of the way and lets you go through. Two, you move out of the way and you let them go through. Or three, you make eye contact and you energetically negotiate. Oh, you're in more of a rush? I'd love to move out of the way. Oh, I am in more of a rush. Would you move out of the way? Or I'm carrying something heavier. Would you move? Like, there is a way to negotiate. If you habitually just move out of the way, chances are you habitually negotiate your integrity in order to find harmony. I'm not saying it's wrong, but if that costs you your integrity, that can suffer. So as a sensitive person, can you learn to walk down the hallway and not stand your ground and make the other person move out of the way, but make eye contact and negotiate and notice any tendency to want to abandon yourself. It's beautiful that you want to try to have the other person feel more ease in their life, but I also care about your ease. And so you don't ever want to abandon yourself. It's a nice little test to do for yourself. Here's the key thing. It's your responsibility to be in your integrity. Nobody else can do that. No, it would be so nice if someone said, sorry, I see you're drawing a boundary. I respect that. Or, oh, I get that you're not comfortable with this. I honor that. It's your job to honor your integrity. And if you are like me, there's a good chance you have attracted relationships in your life where the other person always asks you to move out of your integrity. And that is to serve you to learn how to strengthen, to be in your integrity. It's a really important part to not negotiate that. And it's your job, nobody else's job. You can't expect it of anybody. So what do you do if the people around you experience your sensitivity as an imposition? Oh, like, I have to deal. Here's the thing. If this is what's going on, this is what you're connected to, and this is what the people around you are feeling, if you're here, this will be threatening for the people around you, right? You're feeling this much more. And to get them to acknowledgement, may acknowledge that may be difficult. They may only want to acknowledge this. And so what do you do if you are experiencing more than those around you and they're experiencing it as an imposition, which I'm sure you've experienced that as a sensitive person, if that's who you are? Well, the first one is notice right away if you have any judgments. And there can be all sorts of judgments. The first judgment could be, what's wrong with you? Like, why won't you acknowledge what I see? Right? That's a judgment. The reality is, oh, here is what I see. I hear what you see. Can you see what it is that I see? In other words, can you invite them into your world rather than get pissed off at them for not seeing that it's your world, or judging them for being Luddites because they can't see what you're seeing, or abandoning yourself? What's the use? Why should I bother? Because the people around me don't feel it. This is really key. So notice right away if there's any judgments that you experience when you first do that. And express as clearly as possible what you're experiencing. Oh, I hear that you would like to do this. My concern would be this. I'm wondering if we can take that into consideration when we make our decision. If you are aware of more, it is your job to bring those things forward and to hold the value of them. If you don't think they're that important, no, I kind of see what you're saying. Your point is valid. We can let that go. Or I know that your point's important, but this other one is also really important. So try to express that as clearly as possible. Invite solutions. I hear that you'd like to do it this way. Would you be open to doing it this way so that we take this into consideration, which is what I'm concerned about? And that's a really beautiful way to hold a little bit of additional clarity into that. And keep your heart open. Stay in your integrity. Invite solutions come from staying in connection with the other person, or keeping your heart open in connection with the other person and inviting more possibilities. And that may not be well received because you may be asking others to take more into consideration than they would like to. So notice if you're going to abandon yourself, but also see if you can stay in it in a loving and caring way so that you can find a negotiation point. Okay. So how do you train your strength, and how do you train this, and how do you strengthen your sensitivity? What do you do? Well, the first one, the most important one, is to develop your self-esteem. If you have the potential to negotiate your integrity to find ease or harmony at the cost of your well-being, you lack self-esteem. You will disempower yourself, and truthfully, you disempower the circumstance, because your integrity is essential for evolving any situation. If you abandon your integrity doesn't define the situation that you're in. And then you leave it up to the other people around you, and your voice is not contributing. So self-esteem for sensitive people is the most important thing, because you need to stand in self-love. You need to stand in valuing yourself. Be open to receiving the things around you. Care about the people, but be unshakable in your belief in yourself. It's really interesting. When I applied for a job at the Toronto District School Board, I got yelled at my interview, and it was extremely upsetting. It was a shocking interview, to say the very least. And I had a fairly good self-esteem in that at the end of the interview, I looked at the interviewer and he said, "Is there anything else you want to say?" And I said, "Look, I know how this interview went, but I just want you to know that I'm a teacher. It's who I am. It's what I do." And so I was devastated. It was a profoundly upsetting situation, but I didn't go, "Oh, maybe I'm not a teacher." I said, "No, but I am a teacher. I know that this interview didn't go well. I know I didn't say the things that you wanted me to hear, but that doesn't change my belief in who I am." So self-esteem, that is the foundation. That's the bedrock for all sensitive people to be really strong. The second one is make sure that you take the time and space that you need in order to process, right? I remember going out to a really fun party one night, and I'd been going through something difficult at the time, and everyone was having fun, and I was there, and I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, why can't I just have fun? And I realized, oh, because I need to process right now. It's not time for me to go out to this party and to do stuff. I need to process. And I have no judgment of that now. When I need to process, I process. I take the time and I take the space that I need. And that's your job too. That's connected to your health. Yeah, June, be unshakable in your belief in yourself. I agree, in every way. The next one, which is really helpful, is to connect to the natural flows and rhythms in the world around you. Now, what do I mean by that? One of the challenges of connecting excessively with people is ego and free will and mind issues are really involved in how we interact with each other. Very few people are truly sincere, congruent, open, vulnerable. And so as a sensitive person, you may find yourself around other people negotiating many things. If you need to nurture or recharge yourself, going out into nature. Nature is God's rhythm. It's not a mind's rhythm or a limited human consciousness rhythm, right? Being around animals, they're more connected to the divine. And I'll give you an example of this. As a sensitive person, I rock climbed for years. And when I would rock climb indoors, I could feel the root setter that put the holds on the climb. I'd go up and be like, oh, they're thinking this, or I feel like that. And I was tuning as much into the root setter as trying to figure out what moves to do. It's future medical intuitive in the works there. When I climb outside, that's God's root setting. It's the divine's root setting. It's nature's root setting. The wisdom inherent in that is so much beyond, greater than the mind. And so definitely connecting to natural flows and rhythms is a great way to nourish yourself and to deal with your sensitivity. I like this one a lot here. To become a connoisseur. The shadow of this is to become a critic. Oh, I don't like this and I don't like that. But to be a connoisseur, if you can feel deeply into a situation, why not use that for good? Like a sommelier can sense deeply into wine, or you could become a great critic of film or connoisseur of film. You know, like, oh, why did they choose the lighting like that? And that angle really brings out this feeling or mood in the scene. Connoisseur is a way to hone or to capitalize on the depth in which you feel. And I highly recommend being a connoisseur. I value being a connoisseur. It's a helpful way. And this is, to me, such an essential one. Don't think things personally. The reality is this: if this is you and the other person, if they are suffering, guess what? They come around me, they're gonna suffer. They come around you, they're gonna suffer. They come around their boss, they're gonna suffer. They're gonna feel like this. And it's so easy as a sensitive person to be like, why isn't this happening? Did I do something wrong? Is it directed at me? Don't take things personally. Being able to feel disharmony requires you to stand in your truth and to not take things personally. That's such an important thing. Okay, So those are the main points for the conversation tonight. It's a much deeper topic than this, but for our live stream tonight, I think those are the essential things that I wanted to cover. And I just want to go over them one more time. The primary challenge in sensitivity is that you're not sufficiently embodied in it. It's not that you're too sensitive. I'd say it's that you're not sensitive enough, or you're not enough in your sensitivity. Learn to be in your sensitivity versus disconnecting from it. Second is to recognize that sensitivity is a strength. It is something you can rely on. It's something you can depend on. It's something that can enable you to serve as you are best capable of serving, which is to be a sensitive person, to bring depth into situations. Sensitivity enables you to connect more deeply to reality in the present moment. We need that in this world. So much pain and suffering has come from being disconnected, non-congruent as human beings. And so sensitivity can support you to do that. I know it's hard, but it's rather than diminish that or try to separate yourself from reality, learn to strengthen it. And the phrase for that, once again, well, actually, I'm jumping ahead here, which is if you are sensitive and you're feeling into a situation, if not you, then who? You are best suited to doing that. And then what should have been the last one is to remember that if you're an empath, if you're a sensitive person, your job is to be a processor. And it's important you take the time and space to do that. And to value that process. Say, oh, I'm doing my job. Like my dog Hugo's job is to cuddle. And that's his primary job. He's a King Charles Cavalier, and they were literally bred to cuddle. And so when he's cuddling, he's doing his job. As a sensitive person, when I process, I'm doing my job. It's a beautiful thing to do. So I hope this has been a helpful conversation tonight. I do have a reading to go through this evening. And if you'd still like a reading, I have time to do one online. You're welcome to email in to this address here. And please do. This is a reading for GW, who wrote me this evening. And here's what I got from my reading. So GW, it feels like you're keeping yourself above your pain, but not really sitting into it. It's like as you go into the pain that you're experiencing in yourself and the circumstances, situations in your life, rather than being like, oh yeah, this is hard or this is difficult, I see you staying above it. And I got examples of you explaining or justifying or keeping things positive. No, I get it's gonna be okay. We're gonna figure this one out. It's all right. Rather than, yeah, this is hard. We'll figure it out, but man, it is tough. So it's that being in versus being above. And I see you being above. When I see you in your pain, I see you clenching and bracing. Like this is too much to bear. So you're maybe not moving into your pain to the degree, or the painful things around you to the degree that you're capable of, because it feels like it's too much to bear, that you haven't developed the ability to sit in that degree of discomfort, emotional discomfort, circumstance discomfort, and be okay and breathe into it. And so you're disassociating, being above, rather than taking it head on. When I was asked, like, GW, why would you have this pattern? And what it felt like to me is it reminded me of a child holding an inordinate amount of responsibility in a family situation. And like your parents are struggling or fighting, or your mom's depressed, or something where you are aware of those things and trying to make things, it'd be a tendency to try to make things right rather than just let them be as they are. And the result of that, it's not that it's wrong to try to care for the people around you, it's that you did not sufficiently learn to process your pain in that. If that's true for you, this is what it feels like to me. So what do? Number one, learn to make time to acknowledge and value your needs. That's the part that I really want you to do. Learn to make time to acknowledge and value your needs. That's a really key one. In a way, this is in itself threatening, because when you take time for yourself, you're not giving yourself to supporting the people around you. And so that might seem like a scary thing to do. Feels to me, if that is you, essential. You need to take care of yourself so that you can do that. I got the feelings of tension and pain in your upper back. That reminded me of carrying others' burdens. It's rather than, these are the burdens in the world. Wonder what to do. Oh, this is a burden for me to carry on some level. I also felt tension in your stomach. You'll notice these are themes that seem to follow through a lot of people, but GW, for you, I felt the tension in your stomach. And what I felt in that was not feeling truly settled or at ease. I didn't get the sense of like, man, it's all good. It's all good. That's the thing I didn't feel. It's like, oh, there's this. Yeah, but there's this, but there's this. So there's this constant churning and not being able to be at ease. And so the phrase I wrote for that is, can your well-being be less connected to the well-being of others? In other words, can your well-being be less impacted by the well-being of others? Man, they're struggling, I'm okay. Right now it feels like they're struggling, and until they're not struggling, I'm not going to be okay. They're struggling and I'm okay. Your needs are separate. The phrase I got for that was learning to be sovereign in yourself. And that is true support. That is you truly standing in your integrity in that. And you may need to back out a little bit in order to develop this. You may need to take some space from people in order to value your needs, and I would encourage that. The image I got from there was you going into the forest in solitude to heal. And especially for men, this is a helpful, or for people with a male, predominantly masculine, energetic tendency, solitude in the woods is helpful because you're not having to negotiate other people's needs. You're just focusing on your own needs. And that can help you to stay at ease. So GW, that's what I got from the reading tonight. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you everyone as well for tuning in this evening. It was really nice to have you tonight on the live stream. If there are topics you'd like to cover, I'd be more than happy to explore them with you. My theme for next week is what's the difference between psychic and intuitive, which I think will be a really interesting topic. So I hope you can tune in. But please feel free to email me if you have other topics or things that you'd like to explore. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Take care.